Hey, I'm Bailey,
I'm Michael.
and welcome back to the Facing the Gates podcast. But you didn't think you'd hear that
Yeah.
ever. Me too. I kind of thought the same thing. I
Yeah.
thought we were dead. We kind of are, sort of, but not really. If you know what I mean. Like, the podcast is dead,
But we're alive and well.
but we're doing well, and we're alive.
We're short a member, but
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let me go ahead and address. There's at least two elephants in the room.
the quiet elephant in the room.
Right. One of them is like, why I thought the show was done. Why are we back? I'm down. We're recording. I don't care. We're recording this on New Year's Eve. I'm down in our old hometown. You and I.
Lovely Aiken, South Carolina.
We're both in the same room, which is something that we haven't done. Even when we did the podcast, we haven't done one of those in a while.
Yeah.
So we decided while we're down, enough stuff has happened in our lives that we should just do an episode and talk about it. So why not? And so that's kind of what this is. We're gonna discuss what's going on in each of our lives in the past year and a half, 2 years or so since the last episode came out. And then we're just going to discuss whatever random things we decide to discuss. And some of it may get cut, some of it may not. We may get canceled. Nothing new,
Yeah, a very Michael episode. I've always been the rifter, you've been the scripter. So if you guys
That is true.
If you guys are here for some nice put together scripted content, I'm very sorry, but we're just not doing that.
Yeah, so I'll address the other elephant in the room, and then I'll come back to the whole script thing, because this episode definitely doesn't have one. The other elephant in the room is David is not here.
He moves away.
It is a sad time. He is not in this place, this room, this town, this state.
This
He's
section of the country.
Yeah, he's in a different time zone. He's very far away. And, wish him the best, but we decided to record an episode without him. Don't tell him. He'll be surprised when it comes out and be like, wait, they recorded an episode without me? No, just kidding. I'm sure he'll probably find out before then, but yeah. So that's the other elephant.
Not if Elon Musk has anything to say about it.
What do you mean?
The whole algorithm. Twitter just pushes stuff people pay for now. They don't care.
That's true. Well, who said I'm going to post anything to... I gotta think about posting stuff to social media now. I don't want to do... That's... Okay. Flash forward. We'll probably get to this later. I'm off social media, so I don't want to think about getting on social media for this podcast. But
yeah, same here. I haven't had Facebook since before I moved away while we were still actively doing the podcast. I think the interviews around that time is when I got off Facebook, and then right after that I got off Twitter because it's like a cesspit of sadness.
Yeah, I'll get into that when I fill you in on what all's happened in my life. So there's a couple things I wanted to discuss at the outset, and then I'll just turn it over to you to tell me everything that's happened in your life. One other question people might have is like, wait, are you coming back? Are you doing more? Because everybody's asked me this, right?
Maybe if you guys, stop BSing and watch more episodes.
Well, listen, there are some people who... Listen, okay, all right. I think...
we have a few devout followers.
Yeah. There are definitely some people who care. I haven't paid the most attention to our analytics since we've ended the show, but...
Shout out South Korea. Yep. For some reason, you guys really liked it.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Brain fart. Oh, are we coming back? No, we're not. We're just doing, this is like a one-off thing. However, I will say there is one other episode that's going to be happening after this episode. I don't want to give a release date because I don't know when this episode's coming out, but I have a tentative plan, and I'm not telling you when it is because it might not happen when I want it to happen. But so this episode is just going to be like an update on our lives. And then the next episode is going to be my conversion to Orthodoxy and chronicling in one episode from beginning to end, basically. My upbringing to when I started questioning things in my late teens or whatever, and then going through why I'm not Protestant, why I'm not Catholic, and why eventually I embraced Orthodoxy. I don't want it to be too polemical of like why I'm not these things, but like you do have to lay out some of the groundwork a little bit. And I've discussed some of it in episodes here and there, but I think it'll be good to have one singular episode for people of this podcast who listen and want to know, and B, friends and family who are like, why did you convert to this weird religion where they sing songs constantly as a part of the service, and they just don't get it. And so I'm going to try and like unpack it a little bit, as much as one can do within a reasonable amount of time. Yeah, I think that was pretty much all the stuff. So again, why we're recording these 2 episodes is I think there's enough stuff that's happened in our lives to update you. And I think my conversion to Orthodoxy is a neat addendum to what we did on the podcast. I don't think we have, I mean, you and I discuss things, right? So that was the other thing I was going to mention is Michael and I have obviously kept in touch over the last several years, even though we lived in different places and still live in different places. I'm just down for the holidays. So Michael and I just catch up on the phone. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's 3 hours, and sometimes it's basically like Facing the Gates, but not structured. It's kind of like conversations we had before we did the podcast. And I like those, and I don't think they need to be recorded. Yeah. And it also doesn't fit within the context of what this show is. But all things considered, Michael and I keep in contact and we still talk. This is kind of just going to be like one of those kind of conversations, basically.
Yeah, and plus I get a little cancelable every time.
Well, so do I. I mean, I say...
And somehow even more chaotic every time we talk on the phone or meet up in person. You never know what Michael's going to say or do.
That is true.
Michael does not care about anyone else's opinion.
Facts.
Except my loving girlfriend. That's the only one.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think, is there any other like housekeeping discussion things we need to address before we go into what's happened? Make it sound like we've died. We haven't died, obviously.
Yeah.
But
we're still alive and kicking. Even the one who's not here, the very quiet atheist, he's still alive and kicking. Yeah. Even though I talk to him like once every, feels like 2-3 months when I can get a hold of him. But no, I think that's really all the housekeeping we have to do. Housekeeping.
Anyway, that was dumb. I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna hand it over to you, and you can tell me what has happened in your life and everyone listening through the internet.
Well, let's see. Where do we start here? Right after the podcast ended, I kept trying to find work. And
so you were in Atlanta,
yeah,
when we ended the podcast, right?
Technically Decatur, but it's all Atlanta at the end of the day.
Right.
I moved to Atlanta with my girlfriend because she was going to school, and so I was like, okay, I'm done working in hospitality. I'm done living in Aiken. I want to get out. I don't want to be here. And so I decided, me and her, after her father passed, I was like, okay, that's my sign to just go ahead, do this move, get this over with. And so I can open and start that next chapter. And so, of course, we were still doing the podcast at that time. And then throughout that, kept applying for jobs, remote, in person. And then my lovely cat, Jack, who is asleep in my bed currently, we found out that we had to pay $5,000 to get his teeth removed so he could eat. You gotta eat. Got to.
How old is he?
He is, I think 6, Dang. Something like that. 6, 7. He's a young boy.
I have a cat also. His name is Nacho. And he has gingivitis, and they told me that they might have to take his teeth out. But he's like 11. So
Yeah,
there's a difference.
Makes
there.
more sense. Where my cat, he had a caudal stomatitis, which is like super gingivitis because he's allergic to the plaque that grew on his teeth. And no matter how much he brushed it, it was either every 4 weeks getting a $300 to $400 shot that would last another 4 weeks and eventually will stop working, or take out his teeth. And well, since then, he's been my happy little buddy. We still go out for walks. He still eats dry food, surprisingly.
Wow, with no teeth.
And he likes to play fight because he don't have teeth. It don't hurt. But when we got that news and we were planning for it, it was like, okay, my girlfriend goes to college. She's got a scholarship, so that's how we afforded to live down there. And plus our rent and everything included was $900. And
which is really good.
Yeah.
Especially for Atlanta.
And that included power, water, internet, trash, all that. We had the greatest landlords, like super awesome, never bothered us. If anything broke, they took care of it. Granted, they lived right above us, so it was easy for us to communicate. But after that, I still kept trying to find work, Nothing was going through. It got to a point where I wasn't even getting calls to do virtual interviews or anything. And I didn't bring my car with me because I didn't have money to pay insurance and all that. So I left it in Aiken.
Was this during the recession that we're not in?
This was even before that. And especially the line of work I do, I'm a lead engineer at a hotel. So I'm like chief of maintenance. And I kept trying to find city jobs, county jobs. Really, I applied to be a dog walker at a pet resort and scoop dog poop all day. But no one wanted to hire me. So I that planted that inkling that I wasn't supposed to be there, that there's a bigger plan. And I've always been one to believe that there's a reason behind everything, good or bad. And
I've also, not to interrupt you, but I've heard some very counterintuitive sounding spiritual advice, and that is to pray for closed doors.
It makes sense though, because if every door is open, you don't know where to go.
Right. You've got analysis paralysis.
And so a couple weeks going, looking for jobs, my mom calls me. And at the time, she was working on a task force for hotels going across the country, getting paid to travel, rooms covered, food covered, all that. Where she was working at, she needed a maintenance tech, a chief maintenance tech to help get everything going back. Because I'm not sure if everybody knows, but during COVID, it was rough in hospitality. Because to start, we couldn't sell as many rooms. My property, we were down like 2-3 rooms some days, and I was doing like 2 hours a day every second day. So when she gave me that call, I discussed it with my partner, and because granted, we had lived in different places before, but this was across the country. This was going from Atlanta to Eden Prairie, Minnesota. That's a long drive. I couldn't, if anything happened, I couldn't pick up my car keys and go. So we had to have that discussion. I ended up accepting the offer. My mother came pick me up. I spent a couple of days where she was living at in Alabama. I hit the road. And the first couple of days were weird because it's like, I don't know how to feel. I've always lived in the South. I'm used to our mannerisms, our slang, how we do things, our roads. Because I'll tell you, up there was, I went just to get to the Home Depot, probably 8 traffic circles and 2 lights. And these traffic circles, you were doing 45, 50 through these traffic circles. They were big traffic circles. They're not like the little ones we have here.
I've been through a traffic circle that's like 2 lanes, but it was not 45 miles an hour that you go around it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you mean like the giant ones? Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it was kind of neat. But I got to see a lot more of the United States through that because we stopped. And we drove through the Midwest, and I'm not sure if any of our viewers have driven through the Midwest. Once you get into Missouri and go through there, it's a lot of empty land. Then you hit St. Louis and you go, oh, this place had the #1 amount of hammer murders. We're not stopping here. That was a true fact.
All right. Cool. I mean, not cool, but good to know.
And then in the Midwest, every gas station sells liquor and has lottery machines. So it's like if you want to go sin and ruin your life, go to the gas station. And so, and then the culture shock going up to Minnesota, which all the people there were super nice. But there were like some terms and stuff I didn't understand at first, and I had to do a little research.
Did they say Minnesota?
Minnesota. Wisconsin. Oop.
Is that like
OPE?
Oh, what is that?
It's like
like like
or, yeah.
Okay,
or like a dang or shoot.
Okay, got it.
And
we got any other Minnesota slang that you want to define for us that you didn't know?
Off the top of my head, those are
blocked it out of your memory.
Yeah, the people there were super nice, but they called soda pop. And it was like,
that's how you know you're in the wrong part of the country.
And we had this sweet guest. Her and her husband had been staying at the hotel for like 6 months because their house had mold in it.
Mm-hmm.
And the insurance was taking forever to get it fixed. She'd stop by the front desk and ask my mom, hey, honey, you want a pop? And my mom became a little Yankee-fied because it was 85 degrees and no humidity. And she was out there dying. I was in full black pants, black shoes, long sleeve shirt going like, oi, mate, it's pretty nice out here. I don't know why I went Australian with it. But once I got that inkling and finally got back working and having some sort of financial purpose, it kind of helped drag me out of a little slump I had built myself into, getting rejected and all that. Plus, I was able to work for 2 properties managed by the biggest hospitality firm in America. So that looked really good on my resume. I got paid well.
I think there's also something to be said, like, as a dude, if you have, like, nothing to do. Like, I mean, I don't think, like, we're made to work constantly, but, like, we have to have work.
And
or else, like, we go crazy.
I wouldn't even necessarily say work. I'd say a purpose.
Right, exactly. And as a guy, especially, it's like if you don't have any work to do, then that's gonna like destroy your morale.
Yeah, and granted, I kept myself busy in my apartment, cooking, cleaning, walking, meeting my girlfriend at the bus stop, and taking care of things around the house. But it was kind of getting to the point where it felt like the same thing every day. And so getting up there was a blessing in disguise. And then we ended up having to come back a little bit earlier than we thought because that's when my brother moved away. And so me and my mom...
Come back to Aiken?
Aiken.
Okay.
I was still living in Atlanta technically, but my mom had to come back to Aiken, and I was supposed to be property sitting the week I was supposed to come back, so I had to be here in actually like 2 weeks. And so we drove all the way back 2 days. We stayed in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, at it was a nice looking hotel, but it was filthy. Like, I didn't take a shower. I didn't undress. I slept in my clothes on top of the sheets. And then we drove 17 hours in 1 day the next day. Came back to Aiken. My brother was still here in Aiken. My mom had already got a job offer and accepted it. And I was just kind of stuck here, wondering what's my next move. And I dropped him off I had to take him to the airport the previous time I'd been in Aiken. And actually, no, I took him to the airport when I got back because my mom had a medical thing pop up, and he didn't tell me he didn't buy a return ticket. He didn't tell me it was a one-way ticket. So he just like straight up and moved. All his stuff was still back at home except what he had packed in a bag. And I was hanging out with my brother-in-law and I called him like, hey, bud, when I need to be at the airport pickup, you don't. I'm like, what? They just dropped that bombshell on me. And so then I hung around Aiken with nothing to do. I'd go hang out with my brother-in-law, my sister, and then just kind of sit at the house. Again, feeling that lack of purpose and like, what should I do? Should I come back here, get my old job back, or find me a new job? Do I keep looking for work in Atlanta? I want to, and I didn't necessarily even want to be in Atlanta. I just want to be back with my partner because we've been together almost 11 years now. And throughout COVID, we kind of built that bond even more so than we had. And so then came back, watched my buddy's house for a week, went back to Atlanta. It felt great to be back, but there was still that emptiness. And so then I just got that, I had to start figuring out in my head. And like 2 or 3 weeks later, I had to come back and watch my sister's house. And my sister picked me up a week early, and I told my partner that, look, I'm going to go back. If I find a job, I got to stay. I don't know where I'll be staying at, where I'll be working, living, but I got to do something. So I came back 2 days later, went into my old job. I didn't even have to fill out an application. A good former coworker was still there. She came right up, gave me a hug, and said, "What's got you back in Aiken?" I said, "Well, I need a job." One of the owners who previously I didn't like, he came up, shook my hand and said, "Michael, wait, you want to come back to work?" "Yes, sir." "What day you want to start?" And so that started me back at my old job as chief engineer. So after that, we went through a couple general managers. I strong-armed my way into a raise. And then I started to figure out what's my next step. What's my next plan? So, and without giving too much personal information away, some things had happened regarding my partner and her school, and we made that conscious decision that, hey, you should probably come back and we can get an apartment. We can find jobs. If this isn't the route you're meant to take, it's not the route you're meant to take because something's in the way.
Mm.
So sometimes you have to listen to that. And I was back here paying off my debts because I racked up a lot of credit card debt living in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And I started planning, okay, this is how many paychecks I need to pay that off. These are my bills. This is when I'll have money to get an apartment. This is when I'll have money to, because I also sold my old truck and got a little bit newer one with a lot less miles. And I already had that paid off. And then me and my girlfriend started looking for her job and looking for apartments. She found a temporary job really quickly. And she was still staying with family, which I had never stayed over before. So the first time I stayed over, it was like really awkward. And I was like, this feels weird. It's like, I'm coming to hang out. Like, I remember what sleepovers felt like as a kid, but this feels weird.
Right.
But her family have always been super sweet and accommodating. So, and we started apartment hunting, started looking at some houses. She found a great permanent job that if she wanted to, she could be at for years. I can have my job as long as I want, even though I'm looking to move on. I'm not quitting because I'm not doing that again. I did it once.
Yeah.
I've got more responsibilities now. But I will say moving back allowed me to get a lot closer with my sister, my brother-in-law. his wonderful family. I mean, his mom might as well. Heck, I call her mom most of the time. His grandma, I call her grandma. She might as well be my grandma at this point.
Yeah.
And so coming back, it seemed like it could be detrimental and be the end of either my relationship or my happiness, my well-being, but it turned out to be a massive blessing in the skies, because I was real low and starting to question everything again that I had already answered, which we as humans do. When things get rough, those seeds that have been planted years ago start sprouting, and you got to get the weed killer and spray those boys down. And so we finally, back in right before August, signed all the paperwork. I paid all the money to move in. We started moving in, got our keys. It was a great day, but it was an exhausting day. I'm not sure if you've ever had to move, and ladies, don't take this personally, but us men usually are pretty simple creatures. I had a laundry basket and a laundry bag full of clothes and my computer and my tools I use for work.
Mm-hmm.
The little area we're sitting in, literally, it just took up this little corner, which you guys can't see, but I'm a very skinny, very small person. My torso, that wide. That's all the space it took. But oh my goodness, she had so much more stuff. I didn't even realize. And then we had to move all the furniture I bought in, which, I'm not sure if you guys have put together furniture recently, but it is terrible. Nothing's labeled. Half the screws don't want to go in. Luckily, our couch, our TV stand, my desk, her desk, and one of the dressers was super easy to put together, but our bed frame, I started it the first day we moved in. I didn't get that thing put together until like 2 months later with the help of my mom, because of one screw made me that upset. So we had the true bachelor mattress on the floor.
Wow.
And my girlfriend was just happy with it. So God bless her. And now she keeps buying more stuff for me to put together.
Yay.
But
she has faith in you.
She has faith in my mother. Appreciate you helping out, Mom. And also, I reconnected a little bit with my grandmother, who during the show I hadn't talked to in like at least 2.5 years. Got reconnected with her on a whim, going with my sister, who called me and said, "Hey, I'm taking our grandmother out shopping. You mind tagging along?" And guys, don't do this. I don't recommend it, but I sat at my desk, took me a shot of whiskey, and said, "You know, for you, I will. No one else, though. No one else." And it ended up being one of the better things I decided to do, because we got to talk a lot and figure a lot of things out, and where I fall short, and she's recognized where she falls short in that sense when it comes to our relationship. So we still don't talk super often, but it's a lot better. Also, got a lot closer with my mom and had to help her get out of the hotel industry, and she's done a lot of growth too. So I think all in all, moving back to Aiken's been a good thing for me.
Yeah.
Which I didn't think it would be. I thought I'd just slip back into old habits and be alone forever.
Yeah. That's awesome. Sounds like, sometimes life leads us down these weird rabbit holes and windy paths, but it sounds like it worked out for you, all right?
And also, I have a beautiful icon my good friend Bailey gave me that sits on top of my mantle, because I also don't want to put holes in a wall and have to patch it when I move out, because I don't plan on being in an apartment forever. That's step 2 of the plan, is saving up enough money, because I've got the credit. I just got to save up the money to buy a house.
Nice.
And one last little bit before I pass it off to old Big Bracken Bailey. I also got another cat.
Wow. You got two cats.
I got two cats. I
You're
thought,
officially a cat lady.
Yeah, see, this one had a really sad story though. It just showed it had a litter mate that just showed up in my mom's yard, and it was like a cold, rainy night. And my mom was like, "Should I bring them in?" I already knew she was going to. She asked me and her boyfriend, and we both said, "Bring them babies in," because originally I was gonna bring over one of my mom's cats because she has 4 cats. And she's kind of looking to downsize her herd of 2, formerly 3 dogs, now 2, 4 cats, and a tortoise. And so I was going to rehome one of her cats until this little one showed up, and my girlfriend was like, I want a baby. I want the baby. And I was like, okay, we can get the baby. It's been an experience because it's been like 15 years since I've had a kitten in the house. They are crazy. She's a quirky little girl. And she likes to jump at shadows and get the zoomies in the middle of the night. She likes to attack you if you're laying under the blankets, because I like to fully lay under the blanket. She don't like that. She wants to see you. She wants to be in your business. And she has the loudest purr that will keep you up all night, because she'll be right in your ear, just buzzing along. And her name is Hemi, kind of like the motor, because she's loud and obnoxious, like those Dodge dudes with their big old lifted trucks going fast on these big old mud tires in the parking lot of Walmart. They got to drive home quick to go give their dad a kiss. But yeah, I think that really ties up everything I've been up to, because it's mainly been working to get this place, working on myself, my interpersonal relationships, and trying to learn more, figure out more, and keep on going.
Nice.
So with that note, I'm going to pass it to my buddy Bailey. What's been going on in your life, bucko?
Stuff and things. Okay. I do have questions for you, but I will make the listeners wait until after I tell my story, and then we can just ask each other questions, and then it might make a better flow for dialogue. So I'm sorry, guys. You got to wait until I'm done with this. So I apologize in advance. So we ended the show in... Technically, the last episode I think we did like in February or so of 2022. And then it went out in like April or something.
Yeah.
So at that time, I had just moved to Nashville in October of 2021. With regard to work, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast. I probably didn't, because usually I don't mention a ton of personal stuff, but this is kind of an outlier episode. So I moved to Nashville, got my own apartment. It was... I should not have gotten a 2-bedroom apartment for just myself, but I did.
Big baller over there. I'm in a 1-bedroom with 2 people.
Well, my plan was to use the other bedroom as a studio. That did not happen because the apartment complex I lived in, I was on the middle floor of 3 floors, and everyone else spoke Spanish. So it's kind of hard to explain that your screaming is normal, and so I didn't do that. So I ended up, in fact, any covers that I did during that time, which wasn't a lot, I think I did like 2. I ended up doing my car. So that's a little strange, but it sounds fine. I know it sounds like this is the worst place to record ever, but it actually, I took like a tiny noise isolation thing that you can hold up behind the mic, and then I held the mic, and then I had my laptop in the other seat and just recorded in the parking lot somewhere, which was really DIY, let's say.
Very Hobo Johnson.
Yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. And it was really bad because like whenever I'm tracking, like it doesn't take too long to track something. It takes a couple hours or whatever, maybe, depending on how many layers and stuff. But I need to hydrate. So I have to drink a lot of water. So I would go through like a bottle or two of water, and you know how good my kidneys work, you know.
Baby bladder Bailey.
So yeah, it was a problem because I would have to park somewhere inconspicuous where I could scream in my car without attracting attention, but also be somewhere relatively close to a bathroom. So after about 2 times of doing that and not having a fun experience and risking UTI, just kidding. I haven't had an UTI, but it was a little just difficult to do. So I just didn't do it anymore.
So you could have got one of them like pee jugs, like the old people have for car rides.
I could have. I can't. I just can't. Like I can't pee in the water. I can't. I've got problems. We're not going to talk about it anyway. So to bring it up to where we ended the podcast, I ended up 3 months after moving to Nashville getting laid off. Which was great. I loved it. I was super happy about that one because it caused me an existential crisis because I like just moved to this place. And so my full-time job became applying for jobs. Kind of like what you were talking about. I don't remember how many. I think I applied to like maybe 180, something like that, jobs in a month, and I would basically like 8 to 5 just be applying.
Yeah, it for me as well. It was just like a full-time job, having to scroll through and try to find different places that.
Except that I didn't have anyone else to pay the bills, so it was like I had like maybe 2 months worth of money to pay for stuff, or I was screwed. And then also around the same time, I had just bought a TV right before I got laid off.
I remember that.
And I also, like, I don't know if it was exactly this time, but somewhere around that time, I needed new tires. So I had to get a whole set of tires, which was like $1,000. And, you know, someone who's relatively short out of college, not making a ton of money, living in Nashville, paying for a 2-bedroom apartment, racking up all this debt. And then the recession that's not the recession hits, inflation occurred, and it was very stressful time financially. But thank God I ended up landing a new job about a month into applying for jobs. And in fact, it was very, I think, providential because I was questioning. I was like, okay, I want to be a graphic designer. That's what I went to school to do. If I don't land a job this week, I'm going to do something else because I have no other choice. I need to pay the bills. And so that was part of something that I prayed. I was like, God, if you want me to be a graphic designer, like I need a job this week, or else I'm, you know, obviously I'm praying through the whole time, but it got down to the wire. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to just start applying elsewhere. And I landed a job, thank God. It was very, you know, it's, you see God's hand in things more in hindsight, I think, a lot of times. But especially during that time, my grandmother actually gave me a call. I don't know if I told you this or not. Maybe I did. Or no, I called her and told her I landed a job. And she starts crying. I'm like, why are you crying? And she was like, well, I prayed last night and God told me that he was going to give you a job. And, you know, the God told me kind of stuff, prayers, I tend to like be hesitant on and skeptical about, but it happened. Okay. So, you know, woo woo or not, it happened. And so that was definitely an interesting moment for me. And then roughly right after we ended the show, I was already a catechumen in the Orthodox Church. And then I was received in on Holy Saturday of 2022. No, 21. Yeah, that's when we ended the show, right? 22, 21, 22.
Was it 20? All right, ever since COVID.
It was 22. Yeah, see, the years are weird to me because, like, okay, I moved out in 21, so I was received in 22. So it wasn't this past year, but the year before.
Yeah, because I moved back here a little over a year ago.
Yeah. Anyway, like Michael said, time gets weird. So that happened, and that was, you know, something that was a long time coming, and some of that was documented on Facing the Gates. A lot of it really started, you know, and I tell people who are joining the church now, like I have a friend that was just chrismated today. The life begins, you know, there's so much that you have to go through as a convert to get to the point where you're received into the church. I mean, like personally, conversion. Hurdles you have to overcome if you're Protestant or Catholic. Like sometimes it's an intellectual barrier, sometimes it's an experiential barrier to the worship or whatever. Like everybody has their own cross to bear or struggles to overcome when it comes to becoming Orthodox. But you know, I tell them, I was like, you know, if you think that was difficult, like just wait until you're actually Orthodox, because that's when it actually begins. And I've heard of a lot of friends of mine who have experienced very real spiritual turmoil and difficulty when it comes close to the time of them being received or shortly thereafter. Because you kind of have this idealized image in your head that it's all, you know, green fields, sunshine and roses on the other side once you are in the church and everything's great, except that that's when the real work begins, because then you have to spend the rest of your life repenting. Not that, you know, you may or may not have been doing that before,
Yeah.
but it gets real, basically, is what I'm getting
And
at.
even more sacrifice, because I remember when you first started going, and I want to say it was during Lent time, you were like, Michael, I'm tired of eating rice and beans. I'm so tired. I'm not going to give up.
I had never fasted until Lent, I think, because I was going to St. Ignatius. I didn't adopt fasting until Lent. Now, there's a fasting season before Christmas, Nativity, but I didn't do it. And I had a conversation with a friend. I was like, I'm trying to work out and bulk up, and I don't want to fast right now, and then I'll start with the next fast. And he's like, he looked at me, he's like, Bailey, God hates the swole. And what he said was literally not true, but spiritually it was very true. I knew what he was trying to say. He was like, you're being dumb. Like, just you need to enter into the life of the church and participate to the fullest, and stop being selfish and narcissistic. And he was right. And so I did that for Lent, and it was rough because Lent is the longest period of fasting throughout the year. It's a full.
I realized that every time we would catch up, it was like, "How you doing, bud? I'm hanging in there. I'm so hungry.
Yeah,
I gotta wait.
I've grown a little bit in that regard. I try to not complain as much, but it's a struggle, you know, especially if you like eating meat like I do. So anyway, became Orthodox, made some really good friends at St. Ignatius, and then, you know, life was rosy, and it was great in the end. Just kidding. Being Orthodox and trying to live out the faith in every aspect of your life, you begin to quickly realize just how much of our culture brushes up against traditional faith and morals. And there's a lot of, I mean, it's the workplace, it's your interpersonal relationships, it's how you spend your time, it's how you spend your money, it's everything. Everything. You cannot look at life in a non-spiritual lens. And that is a part of the conversion process that continues after you're received into the church. And so it was this rubber hitting the road that made me realize some issues with my workplace, that I the job that I had started in, I think it was March. About a month or two into working there was some issues that I had with certain projects morally, and I don't want to name the company or the issues or anything. That's irrelevant, really. And as time went on, there were more issues that came up of different calibers and degrees and qualities. And so I began looking for new work. a new job. And I've had full faith that I was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing here. God's going to provide because I'm trying to do the right thing and to not promote sin or to live in such a way that's incongruent with my faith. And so I fully trusted that God would provide. And that got me through for a little while. And then it took a year and a half and I had applied to over 300 jobs. And I'm getting desperate and frustrated and more problems are coming up. This whole, 2023 was the year of AI. And so AI enters the scene in a way that it hadn't before. And depending on what else we get into in this episode, I will reference certain podcasts and priests and speakers that I listen to, and one of them is Father Turbo. Father Turbo Qualls, he's got a podcast called The Royal Path, and it's my favorite Orthodox podcast, hands down. To some people who are not Orthodox, if you do not have the mind of the church and you don't understand symbolism and participational theology, and if you're not in the church, or you're not at least trying to join the church, you may not have any idea what they're talking about, because they're speaking a language that really only makes sense in-house, so to speak. But I was in-house, and so I was getting what they were talking about. And so they discussed a few things about AI that concerned me, to say the least, from a spiritual perspective. And so here I am, probably August or so of this year, July, having a quarter life crisis, because I've got all these issues from all these different angles, whether it's the moral or the financial or the personal or the AI stuff. I've got all these issues from all these different angles about not just my job, but my field as a whole. And I'm like, okay, I asked the same question, am I even meant to be doing graphic design? And so I had a friend, because Orthodoxy is very small, who knew Father Turbo and gave me his contact information. And so I reached out to him, had a conversation with him, and what he recommended I do is the akathist to Saint Xenia for 30 days. For those at home who don't know what an akathist is, it's basically a supplicatory prayer service that one can do on their own. Usually it takes about 30 minutes or so. They come in different lengths, but for the most part, they're about that time frame. And it's basically a series of hymns that glorifies the life of a saint and asks for their intercession for you. And at the very end, there's a prayer, and then there's obviously a time at the end of the akathist where you can put the prayer into your own words. And this was a very intensive thing, because I do have, most Orthodox Christians have a prayer rule where they do a morning and evening set of prayers, but spoiler alert, the akathist being 30 minutes was a little bit longer than my evening prayer rule. And to do that for 30 days, no matter what I'm doing, this is something Father Turbo said. He's like, it doesn't matter what's on tap. It doesn't matter who's playing the football. It doesn't matter what. I don't care about either of those things. But, the point is, you need to do it. And you don't need to slack. You do it for 30 days and you don't stop. And so I did. And by God's providence, I landed a new job that is fully remote, and really answered basically all of the questions that I had. I'm still doing graphic design, which is another answered question. And then I'm doing a little bit of video editing as well, because I've got experience with that in my past. And so that's really where I am right now in terms of work. There have been a lot of developments personally and spiritually, especially given that we just passed Thanksgiving not all that long ago, and it's the end of the year, and it's just that time of year to look back on the year and, number one, be thankful for a lot of things, and number two, be looking ahead at what might be coming in the future in my life. And I will definitely say that while it hasn't been easy at all, it has been extremely fulfilling to struggle on the path of salvation, which is not something that was emphasized in my former confession. It is meaningful to struggle, and through the sacraments of the church, through confession, through the Eucharist, I experience a very real healing and empowerment to do that. It's not me that, I'm so good, I'm so repenting of all my terrible sins, and it's all me. It's not me, because if it were me, I would fail very quickly. And I've learned that. That was another thing that I've learned is like when I try and set out my own way, I fail. One thing I've learned, I think, looking back, at least on this year, is it's difficult because there's some level of it. It is personal. I don't want to give too much away, but there are certain things that I struggle with that I would like to see change. In terms of where I am in life, and I like to think that XYZ physical, tangible thing has to happen in order for me to see that progress is being made to attain that goal. I'm a very goal-oriented person. And looking back, again, hindsight's 2020, and God's providence is a lot more clear at a bird's eye view, whereas when you're in it, as opposed to when you're in the thick of it. So, I can look back on this past year and see repenting of this sin has really helped me come very far in achieving this goal. This job has really opened new opportunities, and financially, especially, will help me in the future. I mean, God willing, I will be debt-free next year. I've got a little bit of student loan and car loan that I'm hoping to planning on paying off very aggressively over the next couple of months. And all of these things, I see now that God had to sort of clear the clutter in my life and organize things a little bit, even though it wasn't in the order that I wanted things to be organized, the way that I wanted things to be organized. I see there is a plan, that the meticulousness is not, it's not the way that I would have done it, but it makes a lot more sense, and I'm glad that I'm not the one in charge, really.
Yeah, I think that's something, if you don't mind me touching on this real quick, when you brought up that you have to struggle. And we talked about something similar earlier, that not everything's always rainbows. It's going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
Life will suck at times. You will ask yourself why. And either you can keep faith or you can give up. If you give up, nothing changes and life still sucks. But it's once you do have to struggle, because this past year, me and you both have struggled in so many varying ways. We've both been broke. We've both been down and distraught, just going, I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing with life. And when we just kind of started to look back and accept and make changes, things work out. Sometimes you have to relinquish, since even though I'm agnostic, I am a theist. I do believe in God, and I do believe in a omnipresent God. And so sometimes I have to remind myself that I have to relinquish my earthly grasp because it is bigger than me, and what will be will be. And sometimes I just have to find out.
Yeah.
And so I do agree that's something that I've seen in my life as well, that the struggle is worth it. And yeah, it's funny how lives parallel at times.
Right. Yeah. One, because you mentioned social media, one other thing I wanted to go into, I think just to touch on the struggle and to give like a tangible example. My first Lent was, let's just try and get through it. Like that was what I did for my first Lent. But the second year, this past year, I wanted to do something a little more, not because I'm super virtuous or anything, but it's like I noticed this is the thing about going to confession is you become a lot more aware of your internal thought life and how certain things affect you. And so I began to notice that I was very uncharitable with those I disagreed with when it comes to politics. I also began to notice that I was very irritable at times with certain people, just in general, not related to anything, and that I was more susceptible to certain types of sins. And so I made the decision under the guidance of my spiritual father to, during Lent, not only to, maintain the regular fast, but to give up social media and to give up political media also during that time, because I sensed that they were affecting me in a negative way. And so, if you if you use something habitually and then you take it away all of a sudden, it's very difficult. And social media I'd gone off and on before, but you have to break the impulse to like touch your phone and like constantly be checking it. And that is an ongoing struggle, even though I'm off social media currently. But I will say the impulsivity that I had to just be constantly checking my phone, radically diminished. My concentration was extremely increased during that time. My spiritual vigilance was increased. And that was also due to the fasting, because that's what part of the point of the fast. But also, staying off political media was it was difficult, because I was someone who, like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and about half the day I'm listening to like spiritual stuff, and the other half the day I was listening to political stuff. And so at the time I was listening to a lot of like Daily Wire and stuff, and there's just a lot of the other side is bad and evil. And it's like there's some truth to the content of what they're talking about, but when it gets down to the brass tacks, you're talking about human beings who are made in the image of God, and you cannot demean or belittle, even if they believe things that actually are evil. And this is not this side or that side. It's like both. Take any political framework out of the question. You cannot demean people who are made in the image of God, and you have to. I needed to learn how to be charitable and cultivate sympathy for people who I disagreed with, and so staying off of that was extremely formative for me in my current iteration of how I interface with politics. Ever since then, I do not interact with politics in the same way. So after Lent, I had no desire to go back to social media. I was like, this sucks. Like it makes me, it sucks me in. It wastes my time. It makes me angry at the act of scrolling inundates you and sedates you to other passions and temptations. And so I don't do it anymore.
It's literally a drug.
It is. And it's designed to be addictive and manipulative.
And rewire your brain.
Right. I don't know if we talked about neuroplasticity on this show or not, but the brain is plastic. It can be rewired.
It's good.
Which, yeah. So if you make a certain choice and you make it again and you make it again and you make it again, you make the path in your brain wider so that it's easier for the neurons to travel in that way. And it makes it easier to make that choice again, which is why addiction is addictive. So when you resist it, then it starts to change. It starts to get more narrow. And this is called neuroplasticity. It's your brain changing based on how you behave. And this is the whole basis behind cognitive behavioral therapy. It's also the basis behind repentance, with regard to social media, I've been off and on during certain points in time since then. Generally speaking, I've decided to stay off. I don't really use it anymore at this point. And by social media, I mean like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I never really use Snapchat.
Discord.
I check Discord every now and then because there's a channel that I care about. I don't message people and stuff.
Or like if we need a video call, I don't count that as using social media.
Right. YouTube, I don't count as social media. I guess it's technically categorically social media.
But it's main intent as long as you stay off the shorts.
Yeah, I don't use shorts. I've never had TikTok. I'm glad I don't have TikTok because I see it rotting people's brain.
Amen.
And I thought it was cringe and stupid when I was in college and seeing adults using TikTok at my internship. And I was like, what? You guys are like 25 years old. Like, what are you doing?
I thought Vine was dumb.
Yeah.
It's just...
Yeah, you thought Vine was dumb.
It's just Vine owned by China.
Right. So anyway, that was with social media. And then with when it came to politics, and I tried to listen to one of the shows that I used to listen to after Lent was over. And by the way, it was really difficult to not click on anything because I would see stuff in like my subscriptions on YouTube. And some of them like have the headline and the thumbnail and the title and stuff. And it's really difficult not to click on it. This was the time when all the banks were crashing. And like you would think like maybe that's relevant information. I should know if my bank's about to crash. But I chose not to click on it. It was difficult, but it was an exercise in self-will and not giving in to impulse.
And it's very freeing.
Yeah.
From my experience. Because now instead of doom scrolling on Facebook or Twitter or looking at the marketplace going, I could buy this, I spend a lot more time with myself and with others.
Mm-hmm.
Like sitting outside on my porch, just watching the birds, the squirrels, the trees, really thinking and breaking down my day. It's a super freeing. If you guys are still on social media and you think it's a problem, take it from both of us because
just get off.
One of the biggest blessings was me getting banned from Twitter. Genuinely, and my account being compromised on Facebook. Granted, I lost a lot of like pictures that I won't get back. I don't care. I'd rather have my mental health and my spiritual well-being.
Yeah. So my experience with engaging in that political media after Lent was I don't care about most of this. Like if it's a 50-minute show, I might care about 15 minutes of it. The rest was just garbage and it was noise and I didn't care. And I noticed that about most of politics is most of it I don't care about. Most of it's irrelevant.
And 9 times out of 10, it's the pot calling the kettle black. That's something I've realized on both sides. Mm-hmm. No matter what, it's like, oh, this person is bad for this. And it's like, well, we've seen what you do too. You're not perfect.
So what changed was I definitely, some of the people that I used to listen to, I don't listen to at all anymore. Some of the people that I used to listen to, I listen to, but a lot on much rarer occasions. Usually what I find myself today preferring is if I'm getting into, and then comes the question of like, okay, how do we define the political and what level of the politics? What I mean by politics is culture war stuff. If I engage in that stuff, there's 1 to 3 YouTube channels maybe that I have that I will watch a 5 to 10 minute long video every now and then, which is drastically down from where it was before. Now, I will say my intake of more meta level geopolitical stuff has significantly increased, partly because I'm Orthodox, and because I'm Orthodox, Orthodoxy is a global religion, and things that happen globally affect the faith, and so I want to be informed to some degree. I'm still trying to figure out the balance on that. And the other thing is like, what else was I going to say about that? It's geopolitics in general is a different type of polemic. It's not a polemic against people or this group of people. It is, in my experience, a little bit more objective. Like, this is just what's happening, right? Yeah. And that, in that way, I can kind of get useful information out of it without necessarily having the repercussions of demeaning other people.
Yeah. And in some cases, depending on where you get your media, they'll try to draw you into that side again. And it's so much easier to just shut it out and go, okay, nope, this is what's happening. And at the end, these are people.
Right. And I will say I have gotten into more, how do I describe it? Meta level, what's underpinning society, stuff that could be adjacent to politics, but isn't exactly the same thing. It's more like there are certain global leaders that say some horrible thing that they want for the future, and then that horrible thing happens. You can kind of connect the dots, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's kind of that kind of stuff that I listen to. I mean, everything that I listen to is alternative media at this point because of censorship. But yeah, that's kind of been my interaction with politics. It's a lot different, and definitely had I had the knowledge that I do now, would have framed our politics episodes, for example, a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But again, like, that's
kind of the point.
Well, that's the right. So like I talked to you about this a little bit earlier today, is like, if we were to do this podcast today, it would be done differently because a lot of the arguments for God's existence that I used were what are considered classical arguments for God's existence. It's a very if this then that logical syllogism based way of arguing someone into the faith, and that can work for some people. But as an Orthodox Christian, I don't find that particularly useful. It's not that it doesn't have its place. I do think if someone wants to be like a well-rounded apologist, it doesn't hurt to know those kinds of arguments. But when it comes to orthodoxy, it's much more relational and case by case, and it depends on what the other person needs as to what they need to hear. So some of that may not even need to be spoken. You're going to, as one of the priests at my church says, you're going to evangelize. It's not optional. How you live your life is evangelism. So, and that's one of the biggest emphases, whatever, within Orthodoxy, is how you live your life, not this is how we're going to convert people.
Yeah,
It's like,
they're not on the corner going, sinners go to hell, come to my church, whoop-de-whoop. They're living life, and just like watching you grow through it, there's a lot of changes that I see as your friend, and a lot of things you tell me that I might not see that makes me go, this is something that would draw people to orthodoxy, versus even some of the preachers that we interviewed. They want to condemn and kind of strong arm you into their denomination. Whereas even talking to Father Mark, there's none of that feeling.
mm-hmm. When you point the finger at someone, you have 4 other ones pointing back at you. Yeah. One of the things that one quote that is often overquoted in Orthodox circles, but I do think is overquoted for a good reason, is Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who says, acquire a spirit of peace and 1,000 around you will be saved. And that is very counterintuitive to the Catholic, Protestant, Western mind that thinks you need to debate with people and convince them into becoming whatever you are. And in reality, like, if you change your life and if you actually participate in the grace that God gives, people will notice that. And it's going to be slow, but nobody becomes a saint overnight. And that affects people. People see that, and that's more significant than words. He's not a saint in the Orthodox Church, but Francis of Assisi has once said, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words.
And ironic, the podcast we were listening to on the way home, I think one of the gentlemen said, it starts with you and how you treat people. How's the man with the job that you would deem below yourself? Why? How do you treat him? Do you treat the cashier at 7-Eleven good? Do you treat the trash man? Because it starts there.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with how you treat people, how you carry yourself, and your devotion and your commitment.
Yeah, so that method of doing apologetics, for the sake of a podcast, would be very boring because we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
We would just go out and be nice to people.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing a show, really.
And then we'd be just one of them garbage YouTubers who have to set up, look, I gave this homeless guy $100.
Yeah, and then you fell into pride. Congratulations.
Yeah.
So the other thing about how I would do apologetics now is, if I'm having a conversation with someone, I'm going to take a more presuppositionalist route, which is kind of a different methodology of doing apologetics. It would be like, okay, you believe X, Y, Z. Why? You would just ask, like, cut away at the presuppositions there and say, like, okay, you believe, like, you can kind of do this with the moral argument, for example. You can be like, okay, you believe I should vote for this candidate because they are more moral. Okay, well, where do morals come from? How do you know that's good? Is there objectivity to morals? See our episode, we've done that on that a long time ago. Or whatever it may be. Because people, and I do still like the moral argument, because people intuitively have a sense of right and wrong, and they don't want to give away the fact that they think morality is subjective. A lot of people will say that, but they don't actually believe it if you press them on it. And so it's kind of things like that where you can be like, okay, you believe things should be this way. Why should it be that way? You believe God does not exist. Who's to say you're wrong? I mean, obviously, I have definitely not worked it out in such a way that I would probably be able to have a great, I don't have an arsenal of presuppositionalist arguments and talking points that I had with classicalist stuff quite yet. I'm still working on that.
but it feels more like conversational.
But it is more conversational.
Instead of argumentative.
Right. And it's more relational, and it makes sense on a personal level.
Yeah, because honestly, that's what me and you do a lot is like, why you feel that way, bud?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is a whole massive tangent. All that to say, a lot has changed in the way that I think and act since becoming Orthodox. And then back to when I was talking about my personal struggles during Lent. Why am I telling you this? Am I telling you this to bring glory to me? Obviously not. The reason I'm telling you this is because I want to give you and people listening to this a tangible example of struggles so you can see, like, this is the cost, this is the benefit, this is what happens, this is the struggle, and you can kind of see, like, the trajectory of that and see a bit more value in living a life like that as opposed to, I don't know, accepting certain preconceived notions about God and then not doing anything else.
Yeah, because I mean, ironically, when you look at the Bible, there's stories of struggle. Look at Job. Moses had struggles. Jesus had the ultimate struggle.
Right.
And it doesn't ham-handedly ask you, why is this good? Why is it? It just shows you and allows you to think. But it also does help to have more modern earthly examples of, hey, this is what I went through. This is everything I was doing, and this is how it helped me.
Mm-hmm.
Once I gave in and accepted that it's a struggle, instead of fighting back the whole time.
Yeah. So basically, I'm saying this as an encouragement to people. An encouragement, one, to struggle and to repent, and two, to know that, you know, they're not alone, that they should repent, because that's the whole life as a Christian, is you're going to spend your whole life doing that, you know? I think that was pretty much all I had. That's my life. That's what's happened in my life.
Woo woo.
Yeah.
Also, get off social media.
Get off social media.
It's cancer. Go out and touch some grass.
Yeah. Go touch a tree, hug a tree, touch some grass, whatever the cool kids say.
Real quick, to get on a little side tangent, and this is something I've noticed even more as the years go by. I feel so bad for kids these days.
Dude.
Like, I see so many parents just put a tablet in front of their kid and just expect them to learn. And do not get me wrong. I do see some benefit for structured use and to teach them how to interact with the world, but also get that kid outside, dig a hole, get dirty. Because, you know, I am 26 years old, and if I didn't go outside, get dirty, scuff my knees up, struggle to do things like learn how to ride a bike, learn how to swim, dude, I'd probably be sick all the time. I'd be bored.
Yeah, well, it's like technology is a tool and should be used as such. And so that's how I approach, like, YouTube, for example. Do I watch stuff that's entertainment and a waste of time? Yes. But sometimes I need a little bit of that. If I'm, you know, all work and no play, I'm going to lose my mind. But I also use it to edify. And, you know, I try and find a good balance between finding, you know, edifying content that expands my knowledge or spiritual experience, and also just stuff that's fun and entertaining I can turn my brain off to.
Yeah.
Same thing when it comes to like technology. When it comes to kids, it's really, really dangerous, especially nowadays, is like, if you're not using it as a tool but as a medicine, you're going to addict them.
Yeah,
and there are many, many ways it can go wrong.
Yeah, because like, not saying because we had technology growing up, but we had it in such a different way. Like we had game stations, we had TVs,
Well, you didn't have algorithms that were predatory trying to keep you on the thing.
and
You didn't have AI coming around trying to get to know you as a person and figure you out.
we also, us and our parents weren't so afraid for us to go walk to a friend's house and go play.
Yeah.
We weren't so fear mongered into believe, because don't get me wrong, the world can be a scary place. But statistically looking, if you look at the crime rates from the 80s and 90s, when my parents were growing up, it's a lot worse than now. There are some crimes that have increased, of course, which is always sad and it's inevitably going to happen, but we have never been in a safer era in humanity. Granted, we are American, so that can be a little rose tinted glasses, but in general, we don't have world wars going. We've got food.
Well,
Not yet. Not yet.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah. And I mean, get these kids outside. Tell them to go walk. Tell them to go play with a friend. Make real life friends. I know Bailey because we were real life friends. And now we use technology as a tool to communicate.
Right.
When we're not able to see each other. But I don't know about you, dude. I'd much rather see you in person.
Exactly. Yeah.
And also, I think that's going to affect a lot of kids being able to meditate and recollect. And because, as I stated, one of my favorite things to do, if I have like a long day at work or something's really bothering me, and my girlfriend's noticed this now, I have a disagreement with someone, I will just go outside, sit, process it, think on it, ask questions, and I'll come out a better person for doing that instead of just going to my screen, hopping on Twitter and going, well, fuck this person, whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop. Or, I'm so pissed off right now, emoji, emoji, emoji.
Mm-hmm.
Because those, for lack of better terms, those aren't people, those are usernames. Those are algorithms. Those are bots. Those are people that don't have, I hate to say this, 99% of users who are chronically online don't really have a life. And yeah.
And who cares what somebody in your Instagram comment says?
Yeah.
Who cares how many people like your post?
And if
it literally doesn't matter.
Yeah. And if you can regulate it, good. Good for you. I can't. I know I can't. And just as you say, the all work, no play, it's like after we went to service today and after there was a coffee hour where people congregated, people talked, had conversations. It is about worship, but it's also about the community, and
you work out your salvation in community.
Yeah.
And so it's important.
And that's a big difference between what I've seen with Orthodoxy, because there's always food. You are going to stay.
Yeah.
You are going to eat. You are going to talk. You're going to meet people.
Yeah.
And if you're like me, people are going to look at you like, you look familiar. And I'll go, I have no idea who you are, but let's talk. Shoot. Yeah. Let's talk for 20 minutes. I told somebody about the podcast today because he asked me, have you came here before? I was like, this is my second time. And I explained what we did on the podcast and all that. And it was like, that's an interaction there. That's a real life person who I've never met before, know nothing about. We now know a little bit about each other. And you just can't do that over a screen.
Yeah. Yeah. Spoiler alert. We did go to St. Elizabeth, the New Martyr in Columbia again with Father Mark. Well, with Michael. Michael and I went. Father Mark was serving, so we didn't really go with him. But, we hung out and talked with him after.
And it's always a pleasure to talk to Father Mark.
Yeah. Shout out Father Mark. We love you.
Big shout out Father Mark.
Yeah. But back to what you were talking about with technology is like, there's a concerted effort to drive people inward. And there is a sense in which that is useful, but in the sense that it's being pushed, it's not useful.
Yeah.
So if you are being forced to entertain yourself constantly with, social media, dopamine addictions, with, just constant entertainment, whatever, whatever you want to put on the screen, if you're constantly absorbed in that virtual reality and not real life, a part of it is like, okay, you're not going outside, you're not talking to real people.
Yeah. And COVID did a big number on everybody with that.
Yes. So COVID did that. And it's like, COVID was a big push for that. And a lot of that has still stayed, or people haven't fully broken out from that because they've got Stockholm syndrome from COVID.
And also another thing is, while everything else keeps getting more and more expensive, I can go buy a tablet today for $150.
Yeah.
I can go buy a computer for $150.
Well, to bring back the Royal Path, one of the co-hosts of that show, Cyprian, he's done a series on his channel called The Attention Economy. And he's like an ex-libertarian guy, but he's, he's very plugged into the tech world because he's a software engineer, and he knows people who are very high up and informed on these kinds of things. And so I won't give it all away, but essentially the attention economy, it kind of started back when people were doom scrolling on TV, flipping channels, channel surfing, and they would try and like figure out, okay, what makes you stop and stay on a channel? And so they kind of, people who are researching this kind of took that model and what they learned from that and then applied it to algorithms on social media to keep you addicted. And Cyprian does a really great job of explaining this in a very down to earth, simple way for you to kind of understand the concerted push. And we even talk about attention as if it were a commodity, like you pay attention. That's why it's called the attention economy.
Yeah.
And so it's, especially as an Orthodox Christian, you really got to be careful about how, where you direct your attention and how long and for what reasons. And the sacraments of the church really, like confession, really help me, for example, to pay attention to those kinds of things. And anyway, all this to say, go check out the Attention Economy series by Cyprian on YouTube. It's like 7 episodes. Each one's like 10 minutes or so. It's very useful when it comes to thinking about things like AI as well. That's kind of like the culmination of the attention economy. But that inward focus is a result of the attention economy, a result of manipulation, especially on kids whose brains are not fully developed and they're being programmed and manipulated into being lifelong consumers and addicts.
And isolated.
Yeah. And whereas if you were looking outward and you're detached enough from technology, I mean, if I know a lot of people at my church who are homeschooled, and the church is nearby, and there's a night and day difference. It's not just the school education system sucks, which yes is true, but it's also like the way Orthodox families raise their kids. It's a much more holistic thing, and a lot less shove a screen in their face. Like there might be a place for screens, but again, as a tool, not a medicine. So people's attention is different. The quality of conversations are different versus people who are doom scrolling TikTok and becoming degenerates. And like I sound like a boomer, right? But
I mean, we both, like, I'm 26. I'm close to my midlife crisis. So, I mean, yeah, dude, we talk about traffic, the weather. I read the newspaper, and I'm just so jaded with American politics. I don't care anymore. Yeah, I'm a boomer.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're the new boomers.
Yeah.
Honestly, watching how technology's advanced and how isolated it makes the individual and separated from themselves in the same vein, it would not surprise me if it's a tool being used by whatever powers that be, on whether it's government or business, to just put us in this dystopian worldview where we act like we talk to everybody and we act like we do things, but we just eventually all come home and just doom scroll and give back every bit of money we make to just survive. But we're satiated because we got that dopamine hit. And I know I might sound like a conspiracy theorist, but every day it makes me feel more and more like that's the case.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly what's happening. Yeah. I think it's an intentional, concerted effort to make people, whether it's Klaus Schwab saying, "We want to make an angry world," or "You will own nothing and be happy." That's a terrible Klaus Schwab impression. But anyway, you get the gist. The idea of 15-minute cities and, you're not going to have meat and you're not going to have anything and you're going to live in your Kumpad virtual reality world and you're going to be happy.
And eggs are $58 an egg.
And okay, so I'm listening through Brave New World. This was a book written in 1931, I think. And like 85% of what's in that book has already happened. It was a text by a guy who's like a high up elite, and he's gone on record in lectures saying, "This is our plan for the world. This is what we want to do." And this is the kind of stuff that I get really into. But this is for anyone who is interested in these kinds of things. If this sounds somewhat accurate and you want to look more into it, one place I would recommend is Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer is a controversial figure when it comes to orthodoxy, but when it comes to the quote-unquote conspiratorial or geopolitical world, I think he's very on point, and he's very smart and knows how to like articulate and give a history of things. And all he does is like, hey, these are what these people are saying, and this is what happens. Because he's done, there's an audiobook I'm listening to on Spotify, Brave New World, and then he's done a kind of like a book club thing with a guy named Quite Frankly on YouTube. It's him and Frank who kind of go through chapter by chapter and discuss the backstory of like that book, and that's something that I'm enjoying right now. But anyway, no, I agree. I think that's intentional. And like you and I have talked, like there are people who are doing this, but because some people will go like to the cultural war stuff, which is like skin deep. And I was victim to, the manipulation
we all
of that.
Have been.
But then there's like the geopolitical / conspiratorial stuff, which is like a layer deeper. Some people stop there though. And the problem is like that is an incomplete, total black pill picture of the world if you go deep enough. Deeper than that though is the reality that is actually happening, which is spiritual. Like we are in spiritual warfare. Angels and demons are fighting, and people are being pulled which way. Some people are aware of it, some people are not aware of it. And there's a book by Father Andrew Stephen Damick called Arise, O God, and it's kind of like the quote-unquote orthodox approach to the gospel, if you will. Basically, the word gospel means good news, as you know, but the gospel was like a genre back in ancient times. So it wasn't necessarily, we think of it as like a religious thing. It wasn't necessarily a religious thing. So for example, there was like the gospel of Caesar Augustus, and typically in that literature, what the person was proclaiming is who is king, who conquered who, what he expects of you, and what's going to happen next. I think I might be getting some of that wrong because it's been a while since I've read it, but that's what the gospel was. And that's a very different understanding when you apply that to like the gospel of Jesus Christ, who it makes total sense within Orthodox theology because we believe Christ is the victor who destroyed death and defeated Hades and the demons and sin. And it makes a ton of sense because he is establishing his reign on earth. And you can choose to participate in that or not. And sometimes you're doing that consciously, and sometimes you're doing it unconsciously. The way I would see the elites who are running things right now, I think some of them are doing it consciously, working evil in the world, synergizing with demons. I think there are probably actual cultic people doing this. And there's a lot of them that probably don't know any of it, and they're just going along because their friends are in the club.
Or any of the 7 deadly sins, they want to keep greed, gluttony, lust. That drives them to not consciously do it, but they're still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
And so, in the same way, when you are a Christian living out the faith, trying to repent, you are trying to be more and more consciously aware of what spiritual powers you are attaching yourself to. And then there are people who are in the middle, who are, as John Heers would say, light people of the Enlightenment. They're modernists. They don't think about religion, quote unquote. And they are cannon fodder to the demons. And they are constantly back and forth. C.S. Lewis talks about this, I think, in the Screw Tape Letters. The Screw Tape Letters is a book about how there's this elder demon named Screwtape, and he's training this younger demon and teaching him how to tempt people. This is set in World War II. And it's very dark and kind of entertaining at the same time, because it's like C.S. Lewis had to put his mind into the mindset of a demon to like describe things, and it is it's a very real spiritual reality. I think it's actually a very illuminating book. I've heard it was very taxing on him to write. Anyway, this is a whole digression. The point is, like, because it sets place in World War II, I think there's a letter where Screwtape talks about the people in their lives literally just being cannon fodder, and they don't want them going close to God. And if they do, they want them to just kind of not really do anything about it, just to have hold a belief on the side, not really do anything, because the demons in that narrative, and I think at least symbolically, this is true, that they feast on human souls, and that's the intent of, there's a lot. I don't know if that's a whole other rabbit hole, but I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, bottom line is we're in real spiritual warfare. That's where I was going with that.
Yeah. And one thing that I will say that, and it's not just the Orthodox, but due to how the liturgy and everything goes, it's way more active. Like, man, I messed up and I wore the wrong shoes today. I still stood the whole time, but you are encased in everything. You're actively there. Whereas, and on the front door said, turn off your cell phones. And I saw one cell phone.
Yeah.
And that was for like 20 seconds. Then it was put back up and and that was near the end. Whereas, like, when we visited a bunch of low churches, the amount of old people I saw doom scrolling on Facebook in the middle. Now, granted, I thought the sermon made me feel super gross, but even I was like, I'm not pulling my phone out. I am above that. I feel gross hearing this man talk, but I'm committed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's by design, is like the liturgy is there. It's a very incarnational way of worshiping because you're standing, you're making the sign of the cross. During certain times of the year, there are prostrations, venerating icons, singing, chanting. It's all participational, and it is taxing on the body. And there's a layer of asceticism that is ingrained within the worship itself, because it's, again, liturgy literally means work of the people. And so when the deacon makes a petition and then the choir and the laity responds, Lord have mercy, we're literally attaching ourselves to the petition that the deacon just read. And it is a very real thing that we're doing. We are praying for people in the world, and we're working out our salvation in fear and trembling physically. And there's something to be said about that, because the body is not bad. There are certain Gnostic groups and really a lot of Christian groups who
don't get me started on those Gnostics. Those are some weird.
well, they think that this earth material this material existence is bad, and so what we really want to do is beam me up, Scotty, and be out of here, and the soul, the spiritual, that's what's good, and the physical is bad.
And guys, that's how you get death cults.
But here's the thing. If matter were bad, God would not have called it good when he created it. He also wouldn't have become incarnate in Jesus Christ and walked the earth.
And he wouldn't have made us in his image.
Exactly. So matter matters, to steal a catchphrase from someone else.
Shout out RJ, 7th grade science class.
Oh, really? She said that?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of it from somebody else. I heard it. But anyway, it's about, it's both prayer and fasting. It's not one or the other. It's both and, because it's a spiritual exercise and it's a physical exercise. You have to, the body has to labor in order to submit to the needs of the spiritual, and has to be trained to do that. And that's not easy for people who haven't done that before, But that's why the worship is different, is because we are trying to submit the physical to the spiritual. But that's not to the neglect of the physical, We have times where we fast, but we also have times where we feast. So
you can't have one without the other.
Right. And that's the thing about Orthodoxy, is it's all about balance in all things.
Because if you're fasting all the time, it can be detrimental. And if you're feasting all the time, you're giving into one of the deadly sins, gluttony.
So this is been a whole thing. I'm going to kind of segue and ask a question of you, because I mentioned that I had a question for you like an hour or two ago. And I'm actually going to ask it now that we've discussed all the other stuff.
Segue.
This is what's called a transition.
Dun, dun, dun.
So obviously, when I kind of went through my whole spiel, and then we had our digressions afterwards, people know where I am spiritually and how things have gone in my life with regard to that, because that was what I talked about. But my question for you is, there are probably people at home wondering, you were an agnostic theist when we ended the show, when we started the show, in this last year and a half, 2 years or whatever. Has there been any spiritual developments in your life? If so, what? And what are you willing to share and that kind of thing?
I'm still an agnostic theist, guys, but I will say I have fully accepted that we are in a world that is with an omnipresent God, all knowing, and when prayer isn't just to ask and beg, it's also to give thanks, and that's your communication with God. And so that's something that has fully cemented due to everything that I've been through. Because, of course, there's times where I'm praying, asking God to help me find the job, do this, do that. And then there's other times where, like, looking in retrospect, I go, okay, I see why all this happened. Because if I was still in Atlanta, I'd probably still not have a job. Or I'd be back living in my mom's house. And one thing that I've started to do is when I notice those things in hindsight and retrospectively, whether I'm meditating or whether I'm just sitting right here, I make sure to give thanks and show appreciation for that. And also, and again, this is something with getting rid of social media, and I've honestly I'll keep up on local news, but national, I do my best to stay away from because it's so sensationalized and fear mongering. But it's allowed me to focus more on realizing everything around me and how kind of starting to understand the even flow of things realistically and spiritually. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mainly getting actually in tune with it and doing more active forms of finding. And that doesn't mean just reading books or listening to the podcast or reading any of the numerous articles you send me, or finding some on my own and learning more. Because, I've always been drawn to religion due to history. I love history, and religion is history. You can't have one without the other. And so, besides reading more in church history, learning more about the schisms and even the more minute ones, like, oh, your calendar is going to be off a day every 2,000 years. Separate. I've also started doing that for my own spiritual health and well-being. Instead of just being worldly and studying papers and reading, I've also started trying to apply some of that to what's going on spiritually inside me. And also, it helps with your mental health substantially. I'm not as much as that scared lost boy as I once was. And that's my main focus, is to continue doing that, continue to stay honest and truthful, to ask questions, both worldly and spiritually, and continue to grow. And also continue to have, because these conversations, if you have any friends or anything, people, don't be afraid to have these conversations with your friends, your loved ones. Explain your viewpoint and hear them out too. Because I've got a friend I work with who, I don't remember what denomination, but it's a Protestant denomination, and I've obviously showed a lot of interest in Orthodoxy over the other denominations, including Catholicism. And don't even get me started on the cults. Want nothing to do with them. And talking to him about my experiences made him interested. And so I've been able to use a lot of what's been sent to me, and because I know a lot more of what I don't like versus what I do like. And so I'm able to articulate and explain, and that's allowed him to start doing the same and start asking these questions, because he was the same way that me and Bailey both were growing up. We just kind of had that, this is church, this is what it is. They're all the same. But I'm just happy I can use my experience and my slow journey to share with other people and allow them to look outside the small box we've put ourselves into. And I've got another close friend who I worked with for a couple of years who she's been doing the same thing and becoming interested because she is tired of Baptist. And I've also been able to forward a lot of things to her and allow her that outlook. And I know from what Bailey sends me that makes the whole journey less intimidating. Because orthodoxy's hella intimidating. If you walk in there, wet behind the ears, no idea what's going on, you are going to look like a lost puppy. And you probably will for a long time. But Orthodoxy also has that community where you're welcomed and someone will tell you what's going on if you want to know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Still actually doing a lot more work on myself. And as I used the same terminology earlier, speaking with Father Mark, I can't put a house up if there's no foundation because it will fumble. It will fall. My lies will be seen through.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the biggest thing for me is building that foundation. And for me, it starts with me because I got a lot of issues. And I got a lot of preconceived notions and a lot of questions that I'm still asking and still learning. So, but yeah.
Well, keep knocking, keep seeking, keep asking. It's good.
Keep learning.
Yeah.
And so, question for you.
Okay. I had another question for you.
Go ahead.
It's kind of a follow-up to that one.
Ask your question.
And then I'll let you ask your question for me. And if you don't want to answer this, it's fine. And you want me to, if this is like too direct and on, putting you on the spot, you can tell me and I'll cut it out. Who cares? But, and I might have asked you this before, but I don't remember recently. What is your take about Jesus Christ as a person? What do you think of him? As C.S. Lewis put it once, you have three options. He's either liar, lunatic, or Lord. As you've looked into things, and obviously you haven't ruled out orthodoxy, what has been your understanding and perception of Jesus?
If I'm being honest, I do not know. That's the largest hang-up I have, is figuring that out. If that makes sense.
Figuring out who Jesus is?
Yes.
Or
because, of course, I know of his earthly work and the miracles, but there's a whole nother section of that I have to break down.
Okay, what do you mean?
Like, outside of the earthly world, what is he?
Like in a spiritual sense?
Yes.
Okay.
That's where my hang up, because obviously I've explained my hang ups with a lot of other denominations, talking about you Catholic and Presbys and Pentecostal and Baptist, and also no offense, Lutherans, but if you know, you know. But honestly, that's my biggest hang up with Christianity, is figuring out, and that's something I've prayed on and looked inside, as well as praying to God to figure out and hopefully one day get past that hang up and have my answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. a lot of different people have a lot of different opinions about Jesus, right? So like all these, Judaism has a very stark opinion of Jesus. Muslims have a very interesting opinion about Jesus.
Yes, very interesting.
Even atheists, like most people, don't believe that Jesus didn't exist. And if they do, they're dumb.
It's proven. There's records.
And obviously, Christians have a certain view about Jesus. It's kind of in the name. So, which, by the way, I should clarify, I do know Christ is a title, not his last name. Anyway, digression.
Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, that's his last name, of Nazareth. Because that's actually how they.
Yeah, they didn't really have last names until like Middle Ages is when that started. But it was more your job, like Smith. Oh, you're a blacksmith.
Yeah. Anyway, to use Jesus' own words, when he's talking to one of the apostles, I think it's Peter. He's like, the Jews say this, the Samaritans say this. Who do you say that I am? And he says, you are Lord, you're the Messiah. That is like the pivotal question. That is like the linchpin to Christianity, right? Because who you say Jesus is really affects everything else.
And honestly, I wonder, and this isn't me digging at anybody, but I wonder if a lot of Christians today can even answer that question truthfully. And not on just a skin deep level, but on an actual...
Like on an experiential level. Is that what you mean?
On a spiritual level, period. Because you can say Jesus is the Messiah, but do you believe it? Do you mean it? Or are you lying?
Do you live in such a way that proves that you mean it?
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing on that. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I would highly recommend reading the New Testament, especially one of the Gospels. I would start. John. The book of John is very theological, right? So you're going to get a lot of Trinitarian language and who Christ is. Matthew is probably the other one I would recommend because it's got a lot of... Matthew is very focused on writing to Jews and translating, pointing out all the fulfillments of prophecy. And so he will write something and say, and this was to fill such and such prophecy in such and such passage. And then, you've got an Orthodox study Bible. It'll have the passage and you can go look it up. And
which, again, thank you for the gift.
Yeah.
I always love the gifts and the wonderful letters you send me.
Yeah. So,
which I still have the letter.
Awesome. So that's a starting place. I've been slowly reading through the entire Bible. I'm in 1 Corinthians right now. I should be finished with the Bible at this rate by roughly April of next year.
It's like it's a big book.
I don't know if I've told you this, but a Christmas present I got, the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. So I'm going to read those after. But anyway, reading the Bible at different points in time in my life and in general, anyone can attest to this, regardless of their background. When you read it, you will pull out certain things, and then you read it again, and it'll pull out other things. So, reading it now as an adult, as an Orthodox Christian, I'm pulling out certain things that are relevant to my current life and my current situation. And I think that is partly how God communicates, is there's a reason why in the ancient world, like there's a lot of parts in the New Testament where one of the authors will say, "It is written." That's not just quoting something that's written. That's telling you that it was important enough to be written down. Because in the ancient world, they didn't write everything down, like we do.
They couldn't.
Yeah, it was expensive.
And what a lot of people don't know is in certain eras, they literally carried a tablet of clay in a stick and they would write in only important things down. And then they would have to either let that clay dry and that's gone, or they'd have to erase it and write something else important down and sacrifice what they had previously written.
Right.
Or carving it in the stone.
Yeah, they didn't have a printing press.
Yeah.
So
there wasn't really paper like that.
So writing meant that it was important enough to write down. And so, I mean, that's the same thing with the scriptures. It was important enough to write down. And it's also a way of participating with God in, it's a certain layer of participation. So is liturgy, and so is the sacraments. Like, there are more intimate and deeper levels of participating in God's energies. And that's a very easy way to do that, is like, you don't have to go anywhere. You can just read it whenever, So not to beat a dead horse or anything, that's what I would recommend in terms of your searching, because I do think that given where you are, certain things will come through the text and communicate to you maybe some of the questions you didn't even know you had. And I know reading it now that I'm Orthodox, I'm picking up things in the text, especially in the New Testament, that I was like, oh, definitely didn't have that verse highlighted when I was a Protestant, And maybe we'll go more into that in my next episode that I'm going to do.
Shoot, there a lot of them books ain't even in the Protestant version.
Right, yeah. So
the Orthodox one's a lot bigger. A lot bigger.
Yeah. So anyway, that was pretty much all. I just wanted to kind of get a reading on where you were with some of that, because I know certain specific people would probably want to know, and myself also. So anyway.
I bet Twitter would like to know.
Yeah.
I'm just joshing around people. Yeah. I'm banned from Twitter.
All right, so I'll turn it over to you. What was your question you had earlier? Unless you forgot it.
What would you say was the biggest hurdle for you to transition to Orthodoxy throughout, from the moment you started considering it to where you're standing now? Because I know it's a progression, and there can be stumbles and steps you have to take. It's not just as you stated earlier, it's not oh, I've done all this, I'm Orthodox. It's, you now have to live it from now until you pass. And even past that, it's forever.
Yeah, so for me, it depends on which time frame we're talking about, which era, I guess, because the thing that I struggle with changes based on what I'm going through in life and the things that I'm thinking about and that kind of thing. And also, two things on this as a preface. Number one, I will be going into more specifics about all of this in the next episode where I discuss my conversion.
Well, how about I reframe the question?
But the other thing I would say, and you can reframe it, but I will say, like, this is going to be a personal answer, and it's coming from someone who was already Christian going to a different type of Christian. So it may not be 100% applicable to your situation, but I can still answer it. So anyway, it's up to you. I can answer it as is, or if you want to reframe it.
Let me reframe it. Let me reframe it this way. If someone was looking to look into Orthodoxy and transition Orthodoxy from another denomination, what would you say? And I'm looking for more of like a blanket term.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is probably the biggest hurdle to initially get through? Would it be like the culture? Because it's a total different culture. I see that with my own eyes. The commitment, you got to be committed. There's no going to church once a month. Or would you say more spiritual? And I know it'll be a case by case, but
yeah. So the Orthodox answer to everything is it depends. It does depend on, number one, are they Protestant or are they Catholic? Because those are two very different conversations.
Yeah.
And if they're Protestant, are they like high church Protestant or low church Protestant? There's gradations.
Damn Protestant.
And then it also depends on like what is their personal background. Like, were they a Kino, Christian in name only? Were they like actually dedicated to where they were before, or were they just kind of I just go? So it does kind of depend. But I'll answer for Catholic and Protestant, I think, because it's different things. But in many ways, it is the same thing. I don't think a Catholic would have, depending on the parish, the Orthodox parish that they go to, I don't think they will have a difficult time culturally. Now, if you go to a very ethnic church, there's going to be a little bit of awkwardness and discomfort. But that in and of itself doesn't rule out what Orthodoxy is. It's not relevant to whether or not that is the true church. So I think there's a certain like level of camaraderie and culture within Catholicism that it's not going to be too foreign to them. And I know that there are many Catholics, particularly in these days, with certain things that Papa Francis is doing, that are probably looking towards Orthodoxy, and for good reason. As an addendum to that, I would make sure that to anyone who's looking to Orthodoxy, make sure you are looking into Orthodoxy with pure intentions, and beware, because the heart of man is wicked and deceitful. Do not convert to Orthodoxy because it's more based. Do not convert to Orthodoxy because there's no pope. These are, in and of itself, siloed off, technically by the books, true. But they are not the reason to convert. The reason to convert is because it is the church that Jesus Christ himself founded. The apostles maintained and kept. The traditions have been handed down from generation to generation and has preserved and maintained that faith through all generations and still holds true to that. And because you experience Christ in the liturgy. Those are the reasons that you should convert. It has to do with the actual to the core truth of the matter, not the extrinsic, superficial, external things, which they might be nice, but that's going to wear off in a year or two. You have to fall in love with what Orthodoxy intrinsically by nature is, or else you're not going to make it. You're going to burn out. And I see this with a lot of people when they are looking into Orthodoxy, they get really zealous and they're going to keep all the fasting rules and they're going to, they're going to do everything and they're going to go balls to the walls and they're going to, be uber Orthodox and they're going to change their Twitter bio and their profile picture, and it's going to be an Orthodox cross. It's going to be like they're going to put the Orthodox cross in the name, and they're going to put Emperor Constantine in the profile picture, and like I see it happen, right? I'm not terminally online, but I'm aware of it. So, you got to pace yourself. Orthodoxy is not about it's not about being overzealous. Zeal is important, but you have to pace yourself in such a way that you can win the race, not a relay. It's not like
it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right. So just be conscious of that. when it comes to fasting or, whatever it is that's different, that you're having to adapt to, because even Catholics are going to have to adapt to that, because most Catholics don't fast nowadays, especially not the way that the Orthodox fast. So take it in strides, pace by pace, keep in conversation with your spiritual father, have one-on-one conversations with your priest. So that's general advice, I think. For Catholics, I think probably it depends. It really does depend, because like they might see the issue, they might see the papacy or there not being a pope as a hurdle. I've met people who are like that, but I would ask them. I would actually probably push them and say, okay, your hierarchical structure of the Roman Church consolidates the authority and power to one individual who basically calls all of the shots and has universal jurisdiction over the entire church. And as we've seen in recent years, he's made some very bad calls, and many popes have.
Most popes.
Yeah, so
historically have. Because they are just men.
We see, and I'm going to go into specifics about Catholicism as well in the next episode. We see a lot of, just to put it bluntly, heresy coming out of Rome. And it is because of the seed of heresy that began at the schism. So I would push people who think that Orthodoxy not having a pope is a problem. The reason Orthodoxy is conciliar in nature and decentralized is precisely to preserve the church. When you have 15, 16, 17 autocephalous churches that are independently governed, if one begins to corrupt, if one gets corrupt, then you've got a bunch of other churches that are not corrupt that can push back and say, obviously they can't tell them what to do necessarily, but the entire church is not compromised by one part of the body, which is sick. Whereas with Rome, all you have is the head, which, by the way, the head of the church is Christ, not the Pope. And so the conciliar nature of the church and Orthodoxy, having all these decentralized hubs, that's the body. Christ is the head. So the head cannot get corrupt because the head is not on earth. The other thing is, and I know Catholics will appeal to this scripture as well, but I would, again, challenge them on this issue. Jesus Christ has said that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church. I think the gates of hell have prevailed against the Roman Catholic Church because of the heresies that have been promoted. Because of the decentralized nature of Orthodoxy and because of Christ's promise to preserve the faith, to preserve the church, that is why the Orthodox Church will not defect. Yes, we have our problems, and I will openly admit that. We've got issues. We've got patriarchs and bishops that are, a little concerning, right? But again, it's about the conciliar nature of the whole, the consensus of the bishops, not the authority of one singular bishop. So that's what I would say probably to Catholics. Catholics could have any number of concerns. One of their concerns might be the divorce and remarriage thing, because technically in Orthodoxy, you can be remarried under certain circumstances if you have a divorce. But the principle of that is a pastoral nature. It's not a clear cut, everybody can get remarried if they get divorced. It's very situational. It's based on the pastoral care of the individual, and it's in conversation with the priest and the bishop. And really, it's a complicated matter. It's not a black and white legalistic. I know Catholics have a very defined canon law rule for everything, but it's like in Orthodoxy, we have to understand that there's a pastoral individual care that has to go into each person. And so with that question, I would just say it's a pastoral one, really.
Yeah.
Both for you to ask the priest about that, and for two, if you are in that situation, you would still ask the priest. So there's no clear-cut answer on that one. Go ahead, what you were going to say.
And as you said, it depends.
Exactly. That's always the answer. For Protestants, there can be a number of hurdles, and again, shameless plug, I'm going to go through a lot of these in the next episode. For a lot of Protestants, and this is the same with Catholics, they are in a framework that automatically includes certain presuppositions and excludes other realities. So in Orthodoxy, we have this language in Greek of the phronema, which means the mind of the church. And every ecclesiastical body has a phronema. It's the possible answers that you permit. It's the box. It's what you allow and what you don't allow. And as you are participating in that ecclesiastical body, whatever it is, you begin to become well-versed and you kind of intuit the answers just based on the framework you're in. I think the hurdle for Protestants is the phronema of Protestantism is so fundamentally different than the phronema of Orthodoxy. The difference between Catholicism and Orthodoxy is like Catholicism, I mean, there's many, but from a framework perspective is Orthodoxy is a lot more open-ended and it doesn't require this top-down structure. Yes, there are councils, but those councils must be ratified by the laity. Otherwise, they're not councils. And if similarly, there can't be there if there's a problem in the hierarchy of the church within Orthodoxy, it's a grassroots effort that works its way up. Whereas with Catholicism, if you get a heretical pope, you can't really do anything.
Yeah, it's the Pope.
Right.
Or if you have a terrible cardinal who does horrific things, if the Pope likes him, he's staying.
Right. So with Protestants, it is a very different. They share like that kind of legalistic framework with Catholics because they're both Western. But Protestants have a lot of presuppositions such as sola scriptura and sola fide. These mean by scripture alone and by faith alone. Again, I'm going to go more into this in my episode, but the idea of it, really one of the biggest issues, I think, for Protestants is the ecclesiastical structure as such. Because Protestants believe ecclesiology means the doctrine of the church. And the Protestant ecclesiology is the invisible church, the branch theory. All are a part of the Church of Christ. The problem with that is if you don't have a defined church with boundaries, you don't know who's in and you don't know who's out. So you begin to psychologize and say, you're in, you're out, and then you've missed the whole point of repentance because you're pointing at other people.
And you also allow heresy to come in.
It is. It's true because when there are no clear defined boundaries, you don't know what's heresy. Now, I mean, like, you can go talk to a Baptist right now and they will tell you that Mormons are heretics. But who decided that? What ecclesiastical structure has bound them to that teaching? Mormons will say they're Christians. And so this causes a major problem of authority. And I'm going to go more into this later, but I keep saying that. But a lot of people in America have a problem with authority as such. And we want to do things our way and not submit to any authority. But the problem is, as whether you want to go Bob Marley or St. Paul, you got to serve somebody, or you're going to be a slave to something. You just have to choose what you're going to be enslaved to.
Yeah, and plus, an ironic part is you have to submit to the authority of God.
Yeah, and with the Protestant Reformation, essentially what that does is it democratizes the papacy. So while the authority was in the Pope in Catholicism, with the Protestant Reformation, the individual becomes the Pope, and the individual gets to choose what they personally believe is right and what they personally believe is wrong. And that is a very dangerous place to be. In Orthodoxy, we call that prelest. It's spiritual delusion. And it is caused by pride and not knowing better. And often people who are new and don't know better, maybe they're a new convert to Orthodoxy, they fall into prelest if they don't check themselves with their priest. People outside of the church fall into prelest all the time because they don't know what prelest is. So anybody can fall into this. And there's a lot of hurdles, I think, that Protestants can have. Sometimes it's the authority structure. Sometimes it's the idea that you can get truth outside of the Bible, because that presupposition is that, well, the Bible's the Word of God. And if I can't find it in the Bible, then I don't believe it. But guess what? Who gave you the Bible? It didn't just drop out of the sky. There were men who gathered at councils who agreed that these were divinely inspired scriptures that the church has been using for generations, and they gave you that. And the interpretation that people have held for over thousands of years even has been the tradition of the church. And then all of a sudden, it gets changed because the tradition of the church is divorced from the experience of those who divorce themselves from the church. And so it leads into all kinds of rabbit holes. And this is why I believe the doctrine of sola scriptura is the reason why we have thousands of splinterings in Protestant denominations, because everyone can come up with their own version of the truth. I think Protestantism is very dangerous spiritually because it leads to the democratization of the faith, the advent of individualism. It encourages narcissism. It encourages the idea of living your own truth, the idea of relativity and subjectivity. Like, all of these things that are issues in our culture more broadly on a secular level are really because these heresies have been propagated within Protestantism, and then they've just gone on crack when they're taken outside of Protestantism, and you have mass delusion, and then you get to where we are now.
And then you also have churches on both sides of an issue. When speaking, it's always, and people, the Catholic Church means the church, the one church.
Catholic means universal.
Yeah, universal. Which is why when each of these Protestant churches use it, it's ironic.
Right.
Because,
so, like, the full name of the Orthodox Church is the Orthodox Catholic Church.
Yeah.
We would call the Catholic Church, usually in a polemic sense, to be precise, we refer to them as the Roman Church or the Latin Church, because we don't believe they are actually Catholic.
Yeah.
If we call them Catholic, we call them that because that's what they call themselves out of charity. We call them that, but we don't believe that they're Catholic in the sense that they are the church, capital C.
Got to put that big C up there.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if that kind of answers the question about Protestantism. I think it will be more thoroughly answered when I go into the specifics of all the things that and I've discussed a little bit of it here, but I'm definitely going to go more in depth in the next episode because it's kind of chronicling my own journey.
It's going to be a big one, boys.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to be, but
it's going to be days long.
It's going to be long.
Bailey's just going to lock himself in a room for 3 days, maybe 4, and just go down the line.
Yep.
From the day he was born.
Well, I'm trying to strike a balance between being thorough and being concise, and that sounds like an oxymoron.
But
so
I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to go through everything without being like 7 hours long. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question. I don't know if you had anything else or where we should go from there.
No, I don't think I really have too much else. We went way longer than we thought we would.
I didn't know how long I was like, maybe it'd be like 2 hours. It's like been like 2.5 hours, something like that. But it's fine. It's fine.
It's always fun.
I've thought of like 1,000,001 things that we could have talked about, but I think for the sake of what this episode is, it's probably best to just leave it contained to this, and you and I can talk off the mic about Zionism and how the Pope is gay and etc. Anyway, we will save that conversation for off the mic because
we don't want to get canceled.
It's politically incorrect. Actually, I've heard some podcasts discuss it on like normal platforms, so
yeah.
it's not illegal.
Yet.
We will probably be considered anti-Semitic because we're not worshiping Israel, but you know,
say la vie.
I don't believe the nation state of Israel is one that needs to be worshipped.
You love and follow the king of the Jews. How can you be anti-Semitic?
Right.
Dun, dun, dun.
They also don't know what the Semitic people are. The church is Israel. The people of God are the Semitic people. And if they deny God, then they're not. That's all I'll say about that. I'm not going to go in a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. We'd be here another like 3 hours.
Yeah. I think we've covered all the stuff for the sake of what we're going to talk about in this episode. Is there anything else that you think that we need to cover before we go back into hibernation forever? Well, you will go into hibernation. I've got another episode to do. By the way, the next episode is going to be just me because I think it's kind of pointless to have Michael and or David there to just basically be my cheerleaders.
Yeah, I'm just going to give him some snippets and like he can just laugh track if he needs.
I'm not putting Michael in the next episode, so you don't have to worry about that. All the people at home who have secretly said, I would listen to it if Michael weren't there. You're getting your dream come true. Episode like 66 or whatever. It's just me.
I feel like it's more than that.
No, maybe it's 65. For those who are at home wondering, obviously the next episode, when we were active with this podcast, we were able to put out an episode a week. The next episode will very much not likely be out next week. I'm hoping to have it out roughly in a month from whenever this goes out, but don't hold me to that.
He might need some proofreading and some cutting and some.
Yeah. It depends on how in depth I want to go and how much who I want to proof it. And how, yeah, I want it to be a quality thing that people can go back to and refer to.
This is going to be your Swampletics. I know you don't know what that is, but
no, I don't.
It kind of similar vein.
Magnum opus, sort of. Except that it's not, because it's really like. I know, like a lot of it's a huge evangelical thing to be like, oh, this is my journey, this is my spiritual journey, but it's like. I promise I'm not doing that, even though I think that's cringe, but I think like there's it's sort of necessary for some people. There's a place for it. It's just I find it cringe most of the time.
Well, also,
but I'm gonna do it anyway, so it's fine.
Most of those are just so surface level. It's like I went up one day during church camp and asked to be saved, and I was saved.
The end.
And I love God. I now remix love songs, and instead of having someone else's name, I just say God or Jesus. Shout out South Park, because they were absolutely right about that.
All right. Anyway, if this episode was not too spicy for you, hopefully it wasn't. I mean, it was a little spicy with certain takes. Hopefully we didn't scare anyone off. But I hope you would tune in to the next episode where I can go more in depth into why I became Orthodox, why I'm even doing an episode like that. I'll save that all for next episode just because I don't want to waste your time anymore.
Yeah, honestly, this episode's more like just using black pepper instead of dumping hot sauce, because like there were some episodes previous where we were just using pure bear mace on a hamburger.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so yeah, we'll be doing that. I'll be doing that next episode in the future sometime, tentatively. Beyond that, as I mentioned earlier, like at the beginning, we're probably not going to do more episodes of this show. We're not really coming back, quote unquote.
Yeah, we're
just doing an update.
Close this book and let what happens happens.
Yeah, we were just doing an update because I think these episodes are relevant as like an appendix or a post-credit scene, so to speak, to the show.
Yeah, and it's also good for us to kind of look back at what we dedicated so much of our time to and appreciate what we did, but also think about how we would do it different.
Right. And I'm not saying that there won't come a time when we'll never do another episode of Facing the Gates. Maybe there might be a situation where we might do another episode, or maybe we might do a different project.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's not. I don't know. So,
maybe we become VTubers.
I don't know what that is.
The streamers who inside of their faces.
It's the anime girls.
Well, there's also dogs and turtles.
Oh, those people.
Geckos.
Wow,
cars.
It's gotten much more advanced than when I was a kid.
I
found out about that like 5 months ago. I didn't know that there was other things.
They now also do like interviews and stories in VR.
Anyway, this is a digression.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. If you listen to this whole thing, thank you. I'm sorry that it was so long, but hopefully it was entertaining. It was obviously a more off the cuff, non-scripted, not a super researched thing. If you want that, we got plenty of episodes that are that.
Plenty.
And
this is more like
the next one will sort of be that a little bit.
You're just hanging out with us with this one. You need listen to this while you're taking a poop, driving a car, walking the dog, cooking dinner.
Right.
Like it's not a super serial deep dive type episode.
Yeah.
We're just catching up.
Yep.
Catching up with you guys.
Yep.
And hope all y'all had a wonderful Christmas.
Now the fun part comes. I have to come up with a cool name for this episode. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to it now, you see the great title that I came up with, but
it's 10 out of 10.
Yeah. Anyway,
we'll do again.
I think we've tried to end this like 7 times, so I think we're going to actually end it now and stop wasting your time, so you can go home and do whatever it is you people do after you listen to this wonderful 5 out of 5 stars podcast. Which, by the way, give us reviews.
Yeah,
5 stars.
Hopefully,
share it with your friends.
Hopefully, everyone had a good Christmas. Have a safe New Year's.
Yeah,
I think it's been real.
I think it's been fun.
I think it's been real fun. And for the last time, signing out with Facing the Gates. Besides Bailey's episode.
Yeah, we'll see you sometime. That's it.
Bye.
Goodbye.